Oh, it's been a while. Right, so, Ergo clears. It's not a very good background, is it? Give it a second. Ergo clears are a tactile Frankenspring switch composed of a cherry MX clear with lighter springs. A cherry MX clear? What's that? I only know cherry MX browns, cherry MX reds, cherry MX blue. Fortunately for you, I'm going to tell you in this very short history lesson. Other one that nobody likes, Gator yellows, are those Cherry MX clears date back to as early as March 1988 and were made, just like cherry MX browns, at the request of a client. They also have the largest tactile bump of any of the cherry switches. They feature a colourless rather than actually transparent stem. They have a small amount of pre-travel followed by a low to medium sized, relatively short and most importantly, noticeable tactile bump. Just in case you didn't know, tactility is almost always generated in MX style switches by running a notch-like protrusion in the switch stem legs over a U-shaped leaf spring, like so. Factors like the length and angle of the leaf spring and the size and shape of the protrusion will determine how big the tactile bump is and at what point it actually occurs in the key press. Now, from what I can see, both the MX Brown and MX Clear share the same leaf. The other reason why MX Brown's tactility is so non-existent, light, is that the bump in the stem leg is very small and flat. It glides over the leaf with very little problem, ergo very light tactile bump. I personally think it's non-existent, but you know. However, compared to the bump on the MX Clears, whew, wow! Look at that size, that shape, that Bro, there is no way you're pressing this and you're not noticing it, okay? So it seems that Cherry made an actual tactile in the MX Clears. The only way they could ruin this now is by, I don't know, maybe putting a near 100 gram spring in there so that all remnants of tactility is ruined and the bottom out is insanely heavy. No, they wouldn't. Fortunately, in 2011, someone decided that enough was enough. The springs have to go. March 18th, 2011, PCAC user MTO posts a build guide about a Philco keyboard with Cherry MX Clears. He reports that the MX Clears felt a bit too heavy for me, especially on the outer perimeter keys, so I experimented with different key configurations to improve the feel. Now, after purchasing a Deck 82 of Cherry MX Blacks, he took the Blacks out, opened them up, took their springs, put them in the Clears. The result? A key switch that's easier to press than a Cherry MX Clear and more tactile than a Cherry MX Brown. Since it's a cross between the Clears and the Browns, I think the name Ergo Clear fits well. And thus, Ergo Clears were born. Not quite. These original Ergo Clears, you know, the ones made of the slightly lighter MX Black springs, those are known as Panda Clears, and the original documentation for what is now the standard Ergo Clear was posted a few weeks later. For this recipe, you will need a Cherry MX Clear, and the springs from either a Cherry MX Red, Blue, or Brown switch, or any kind of 60 to 62 gram switch. Now you want to watch this part carefully, the method is kind of complicated. What you want to do is ta-da! Yeah, that's it. An Ergo Clear is an MX Clear with the spring of a Cherry MX Red, Blue, or Brown switch. Now we have paid our dues and cooked up a batch of spicy Ergo Clears. Just how do they feel? Amazing. Ergo Clears are the quintessential P-shaped tactile. There's a little bit of pre-travel before the tactile event, starting at around 33 grams, rising up to its tactile peak of 50 grams, and falling back to 30 grams where they actuate, that is 2mm by the way, finishing off with 2mm of linear travel and bottoming out at a standard 4mm. The result is a mid-key press, almost pinprick tactile bump. It's definitely noticeable, but not in an overbearing kind of way. So just like Browns, they do have a bit of pre-travel, but unlike Browns, the bump is actually there. Noticeably bigger and slightly more drawn out. Ergo clearly better than MX Browns. But when you compare them to many of the modern tactiles, like the no pre-travel having big ass D tactiles like the Zelios V2s, Kiwis, Holy Pandas, T1s for example, the Ergo Clear's bump is nowhere near as big nor as drawn out and rounded. Unlike the Zelios V2s, the Kiwis, the T1s, the Pandas, you don't feel like you're going up against a 70 gram wall at the top of the key press because, oh wait, you're not. You don't feel like your finger is sinking into the abyss that is the whole key press because, oh wait, they're not. If you choose to use a slightly heavier spring, say 67 grams, 75 grams, it will start to feel more like a regular MX Clear. That is, whilst the peak tactile force is greater, giving you what feels like a sharper and shorter tactile bump, that tactile bump is just gonna feel less standouty against that heavier spring, but the upstroke will feel a lot more explosive. And anything lighter than the 60, 62 gram cherry springs will give you a similar, if not slightly more noticeable tactile bump with a lighter bottom out and less explosive upstroke. Do be aware, however, that the standard 62 gram springs, whilst generally strong enough to return the switch stem back to resting when you press it, sometimes if you push really slowly it gives you this kind of sticking feeling. So using springs lighter than those is likely to give you inconsistent returning issues. Interesting factoid, this is one of the reasons why the founding fathers of mechanical keyboards used to lube their Ergo clears. It was to help it return more consistently. Now, smoothness wise, it's kind of hard to predict. It's very much based on how good a batch of MX Clears you get. If you get a very nice or well-worn-in batch of MX Clears, you have a very nice and smooth batch of Ergo Clears. Now, both stock and comparatively lubed, I wouldn't say they're as smooth as, you know, T1s or Zelia's V2s or whatnot when going over that bump, but a nice lubed batch of Ergo Clears is nothing to scoff at. And if you get a batch of scratchy cherry MX Clears, you will have a batch of scratchy Ergo Clears. Like, that's not rocket science. You can still lube them and they'll still obviously improve and do become relatively smoother, but a good batch helps. Pro tip, film your Ergo Clears. You're going to be opening them up, swapping out springs, lubing, finagling top housings, losing a bunch of the stems, cursing the fact that you ever started doing this. Just film them and get those oneness of sound gains, you know? Speaking of sound, the Cherry MX full nylon housing is a cheat code. It just sounds, and I hate to be so vague, but it just sounds so full. So full. You get this nice deep bottoming out thwack. No weak, plasticky topping out sound here. Take notes, JWK. But the Ergo Clears have been said to sound inherently scratchy, and I disagree. It's not scratch, it's the sound of that mid-stroke tactile bump. And because of it, you get a 4 rather than a 2-stage sound profile. It's that tactile bump down, bottom out, tactile bump up, topping out sound. I would describe the sound profile as chalky. You might like that or you may not, but here's a sound test. So, Ergo Clears, what Cherry MX Brown should have been from the start. Ergo Clears, a mid-stroke, low-medium tactile, rich in mechanical keyboard lore. MX Clears are not hard to find, and aftermarket springs are not hard to come by. Probably overall still slightly cheaper than whatever JWK recolor you've been looking at. And if you haven't noticed by the shade, yes, I like them very, very much. By the way, I am trying to upload, here we go, 50 videos this year, which is almost double what I did last year. If you would like to see me attempt this, why not consider subscribing to the Glarses channel and clicking that little notification bell now. Click it now. Thank you. That is all. Okay, thanks, bye.